I'd like to call the meeting back to order. This is a Oak Harbor City Council workshop, September 28th. We took a short break. It is 4:07, and we are on item the City of Oak Harbor Financial Primer Part 2 with our Finance Director, Mr. David Goldman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the Financial Primer Part 2, Expenses. So I hope everybody's ready to hear me talk again. Because, I was going to make a dumb joke. I'm not doing it. But anyhow, the first two sections of the primer, Part 1 and Part 1A and Part 1B, were about revenues. And this item is about the expenses that go into our budget and where we charge all of our costs to. So with that, let's move on. So the major expense categories that you'll find are personnel. That includes employee wages and benefits, operating and maintenance. Those are costs associated with city operations, such as supplies, fuel, professional services, and so on. You have capital outlay. That includes the capitalizable cost of projects and other items too that aren't part of projects but are smaller type of things like smaller equipment and furniture, and also transfers between funds. So looking at all the funds in the past 3 years of actual results, you can see how it looks in the different categories. There's personnel, there is operating and maintenance, there is your capital outlay, and transfers between funds. The blue is 2019, the orange is 2020, and the gray on the right is 2021. This is what this looks like for 2021. For all of our funds, that's general fund and all of our utility funds and everything together, about 60% of all of our expenses were operating and maintenance, and debt services in there too. 28% were personnel, and that'll vary by fund. 12% were transfers, and 1% was capital outlay. So with general fund expenses, you can see that personnel is the largest portion of general fund. Operating and maintenance is down here. Capital outlay is over here, and transfers is down there. And looking at the 2021 results, you can see 3/4 of the general fund is personnel, and the other 2/3 is personnel, and the other third or so is transfers, capital outlay, and operating and maintenance. The streets, arterials, and TBD funds, that's funds 101 through 108, with the exception of 105 and 106. You can see that those are more operating and maintenance weighted because there's a lot of street construction on that. Here's the construction, and here's the operating maintenance that goes along with that construction, also maintaining our streets and roads throughout the city. And you'll see transfers too. Those are mostly transfers from the operating accounts to the construction accounts. And for 2021, that's what that looks like.
David,
yes.
Excuse me a second. Why the big difference between 2020 and 2021?
Oh, there were just large capital outlay expenses for that particular year. I don't know the projects off the top of my head. Maybe.
Well, I'm noticing we're also down in operating and maintenance.
Over here. Yeah, I can look at let me look at my spreadsheet here. Is this the one? Yeah, all right.
And just so you know, the reason behind my request is one of the things we promised to the community when we went out with the TBD and asked for their support about it was that we were not going to peel back the existing dollars we were spending on street maintenance, that we were not going to take the money that we had already budgeted from year to year for street maintenance, take that, divert that someplace else, and then just rely upon the TBD. We told them that the TBD would be above and beyond the maintenance we're already doing on the streets, and I want to make sure we're keeping that promise.
Oh yeah, that hasn't happened. That hasn't happened. I could get you that answer. I have the chart here, but it doesn't seem to want to work for me.
Yeah, if you could just
now.
send me a follow-up email with that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Would you send all of that, please, David?
Oh yeah, not a problem.
Thank
Let me
you,
make a
thank
note.
you.
Streets, fund, arterial. All right, excellent. And there's the 2021 breakdown. Senior services, you can see for these years, and these years do also include the COVID years. You can see that personnel expenses are over here. Operating and maintenance had decreased due to closures. Capital outlay, there was a capital outlay in 2019, but there was nothing in 20 and 21. And transfer expenses are mostly for that local loan for street lighting or for lighting in the parking lot or whatnot, that certain funds have to pay into the debt service fund. It's a small amount. You can see for senior services, you have 68% for personnel and about 31% for operating and maintenance for 2021. Water fund expenses. So you can see the same trends. Personnel is a small percentage of all the costs. The operating and maintenance is the largest portion. You have capital outlay depending on the projects that are programmed in that year. And you have transfers as well. And that's mostly transfers from the water fund to the construction fund. And there you can see for 2021, operating and maintenance, largest percentage, and the other percentages are located on the left. For the sewer funds, it's a similar picture, except the operating and maintenance is larger. $7 million of this, at least for 21, was for debt service. The debt service was a lower amount in 2019 as it was phased into the current $7.05 million it is a year in 21 and 22 and 23 and so on. There were capital outlay projects in 2019. That was the last year of major construction on the clean water facility. So transfers between funds and then capital outlay expenses. And there's the pie chart for 2021. So solid waste fund expenses, similar picture, different numbers. Operating and maintenance is here, personnel's there, and you have some transfers as well. And there's the pie chart. Storm drain fund expenses. So there's your operating and maintenance, personnel, transfers, and the capital outlay. And there's the pie chart for 21. Then you have the Marina Fund, which is the operating fund and the capital fund and the reserve fund. There's the personnel, there's your operating and maintenance. This includes, cost of fuel and all the other services are provided to the folks who use the marina. Capital outlay, also debt services in here too. You have capital outlay and you have also transfers. And there's the pie chart for that for 21. Then here are the 5 internal service funds that we can keep. Here are the expenses related to those. Here's the personnel. Personnel is all located in Fund 501 and 510. 501 is the vehicle repair. Oh, sorry. Oh, that's the vehicle repair fund, and 510 is the Public Works Administration, engineering, and a few other items in there. And you had a large transfer in 2019 for a project, and there's your operating maintenance costs and capital outlay. And there's the pie chart for 2021. And here are some details on the different types of expenses. So for all fund, you're hearing something. All right. So for the personnel expenses, you have the salaries or wages, basically. That includes the salaries and overtime. And this is that's this portion here. The 11.9 million is the wages portion, and the 23% is on the next slide. That's the benefit portion. And this is a little bit more detailed than the other slide. This line here where it says personal benefits, those are the costs of the personal benefits that employees get, such as health care, dental care, and also, even though this one says pension, the costs that we pay into the state pension are over here. This row is really a non-cash type expense we have to report for the financials. This row consists of our share of the state pension funds. There's a proportional share that we have to follow per generally accepted accounting principles, and we have to record those pension assets on our books. Every city and every county and everybody in the state pension has to do that. And in addition, we also have other post-employment benefit information that we have to record there as well. This went up dramatically in 21 compared to 20 based on the rate of return that the state received. You can see that in 21 for their various pension funds, the rate of return was pretty dramatic compared to 20 and 19 and previous years. And we do record this as a negative amount, even though it's an asset. So that's just an accounting principle we have to do for the financials. But it's not cash. It's not anything that really affects our cash balances. So operating and maintenance has a number of different categories, which I broke down so we can go over them. So for communications, you can see that the total for these years is about 600,000. It went up in 2021 due to ICOM cost increases. You can see, those are mostly found in the police lines and also the fire lines as well. The other funds just have, just the costs were more or less in line with trend for the other funds. Debt service. So in 2011, there was the dredging bond that was taken out for the marina that was refunded with the 2021 bond. So the new bond that was taken out in 21 will mature in 2025. So you'll see that the actual debt service expenses for the marina will be higher than these numbers in the next 4 years, but then it'll be paid off. And then we'll be looking at, possibly a new dredging bond, depending on the direction we go in with the study and everything else we've talked about in the past. The miscellaneous is for the 2016 lighting upgrade. That's the local loan, and that matures in 2025. That's paid off by about 5 different funds, a few different areas of the city. It's about $60,000 a year. In sewer, that is the clean water facility debt. The bond matures in 2046, and the state revolving loan funds mature in 2036 to 2038. And you can see what the actual expenses were here in that sewer line. And storm drain, you'll notice there's a Public Works Trust Fund loan that matures in 2031. And water, there's also a Public Works Trust Fund loan that matures in 25 and 26. So more operating and maintenance, you have the depreciation and AROs. So these are another one of those non-cash expenses. This is a generally accepted accounting principle, mandatory expense. Depreciation, those are only required in our proprietary funds, which means the utility funds and the marina fund. It's not cash expense. And the ARO, or asset retirement obligations, it's another mandatory non-cash expense. This applies to water wells that are no longer used or needed and have reached the end of their serviceable life, and they're required by law to be decommissioned. Marina timber barges, there's some timber barges that they were identified for retirement by the DNR in the DNR lease with the city marina, and the estimated costs associated with these are amortized over the useful life and are accounted for in the financials, although these have no cash impact. They have to be accounted for in our financial reporting. Next up is insurance. We obtain our insurance through the Washington City's Insurance Authority. We have auto, boiler, property, crime, and liability. And the insurance costs are depending on type and the schedules that are used, such as the number of vehicles we have, our property schedule, number of employees, the size of the budget, and so on. And these were the total cost of the WCIA for these years.
Hey, Dave, could I ask one question?
Sure.
I know I could tell that you are wondering why I didn't ask you when we met yesterday. Everything else.
Oh, those are all the other funds. What I did was I looked through, I have a listing of how all the funds were impacted by this particular expense, and it's like 30 deep and it would not fit in the slide. So I looked at the largest impacts. So I noticed the largest number was general government. Another large hit was sewer. All the other utilities I added up and put there. The internal service funds were there. And then everything else is all the other funds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I
So
did,
it-
so it would fit on the slide.
It's
Yeah.
literally everything except the four above it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Otherwise, you'd see like $200, 20,000, 1,500.
Yeah,
So I just kinda-
thanks for not showing us all that.
Right. So interfund charges, these are allocated to the above funds by State Auditor Office reviewed formulas. So these are the expenses associated with interfund charges. You can see that the total is about $8 million a year. And this is how it impacts the different funds. The next slide, I think, I put how it works, like where these funds are going towards. So these are the charges for the different funds that we have, and this is the reason for the charges. And I pulled, for example, the reserve for replacements together. So we have a vehicle and equipment reserve for replacement. We have a facility reserve for replacement and a technology reserve for replacement internal service fund. I added those together and it makes up about 24% of the 2001 column. The general fund is this one, this IDCA, the indirect cost allocation. That percentage amounts to about 3.9 or 3.85 or something percent of all the expenses and all the funds. And that is, that's about 29% of all the interfund charges. And 47% are the other funds, our Public Works Motor Pool, Fund 510, and 501, and the four components of Fund 510. You have the shop operations, you have engineering, you have the supervisory salary, and the Public Works labor pool. And also we have this various funds. There's Public Works labor. It's a smaller amount than the others, and it's just based on the usage of certain public funds labor and how it just charges out to various funds. Those together amount to about 47% of all the charges. So items purchased for resale include the cost of water from Anacortes, parts and supplies from the vehicle repair, for vehicle repair in the shop, fuel, propane, ice, so on for the marina, and supplies for development services and streets. So you can see how they're broken down in the different component parts over here. Water is really the cost of Anacortes. It's the largest one in this row here, about 1.9 or so. This 2020 was a little lower, but about 1.9 million a year for that. So leases and rentals includes leases for printers and photocopiers, portables, motorized equipment, and power tools. And also the marina's lease with the Washington State DNR. And this is how they're broken down among the different funds. It's a smaller amount than some of the other things we looked at, so I was able to put in some of the smaller numbers here for context purposes. So these are general operating and maintenance costs. These are not specifically categorized elsewhere. So this would include stuff like office supplies, janitorial supplies, general operating supplies, small tools and equipment, like LTAC, grantee disbursements, elections expenses, just various catch-all for miscellaneous expenses. And this is how these were broken out among the different funds for those costs. So professional services are all the contracts, the various contracts the city has entered into. For the general fund, those amounts are mostly comprised of legal expenses, court expenses, and public safety and jail, which has increased. The jail cost has increased over the past few years. But you can see how it's broken down in all the different funds here. So public utility services, that includes the cost for city utilities. and other public utilities. So it's basically, for example, how much in the general fund you'd have, how much, for example, parks pays for, you know, the water bill, or for the electric bill, or the propane or gas bill, and so on. And this is how it's categorized in the different funds over here. You know, solid waste is kind of high because it includes the cost of dumpsters and the tipping fees we pay to Island County, and that's categorized in the BAR's manual as a public utility service, not just a professional service, so it has to go in this area. These are taxes that include sales taxes and excise taxes remitted to the state. And for utility funds, it includes the city's utility taxes that are collected by our customers and then sent over to either the general fund or the, what do you call it, or the arts fund. There's a small amount that goes to the arts fund as well. Yeah, and also there'd be, you know, any other taxes that they have to pay as well to the state. So that's broken out. These are travel expenses pertaining to work-related conferences, seminars, and training. You can see that when COVID came, those dropped off pretty dramatically. You know, we expect, I mean, those have already picked up in 2022 as more and more trainings and conferences have become in person, and those will likely, you know, barring anything catastrophic happening in 23, you know, those might pick up to more normal levels, but they might not. You know, there are still a lot of organizations that have virtual type of trainings and conferences, and we may not go back to that level in 2019 and 18 and so on. So, you know, we'll see how that pans out. And then here's all the capital stuff, including, you know, anything that's capitalizable that we have to report in our financials. For example, major projects, you know, land, buildings, improvements, machinery, vehicles, and smaller items like furniture, maybe smaller equipment that might not meet the threshold for, you know, a capital project, but we still have to track as an asset and report in our financials. And these are also transfers between funds, and those are typically done for capital projects and debt service. And, you know, we do have a transfer from the general fund to the senior services fund and you know, stuff like that. So that's what that looks like for the different funds. And that's it for part two. So we got through part two, and we'll be coming up with new primers to go over different areas of what we do here in finance and how that affects citizens, you know, and the city as a whole. But we're thinking we might hold off on doing the next primer until after our audit's done, and also after the budget process is completed in December. So with that, does anybody have any questions?
Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Not a question, just an observation. You have a very amazing way of simplifying something that is so nuanced, if you will. So thank you. You would think that these would be like watching paint dry, but they're actually very informational. You do a very good job. Thank you.
Yeah, but sometimes I slip up. I think in the last presentation, you know, I look back at the last 14 years of property taxes, and we have raised, you know, to that 1% level of, you know, every year. There's sometimes, you know, the implicit price deflator or the state's inflation factor has been under 1%, but we've passed a resolution to go to that full 1%. Part of the reasoning is, I think I heard from the council last time or time before that, is because when inflation's at higher than 1%, which I'm pretty sure when we get the numbers next week from the state, where it's going to be higher than 1%, you know, cities and counties are still limited to that 1%. So I think I may have said customary at the last. I didn't really mean customary. I just look at the past 14 years, and it's just it was done every time. So, so I'm trying to make it simple, but sometimes maybe I use the wrong word. You know, apologize for that. But thank you, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.